Hello, everybody, and welcome to our new Facebook Live series. My name is Abigail Richardson-Schulte, and I am composer in residence with the HPO. This is a great chance for us to get to know more about our HPO musicians, and so we have called this series Get to Know the HPO. It will be a weekly series right here now, Wednesdays at noon, and is also part of our HPO at Home series. Today, I am delighted to welcome our HPO horn player, Neil Spaulding. Welcome, Neil.
To be participating in this new initiative, and it's a great way to communicate, I hope, with everybody out there who cares about music and cares about Hamilton and cares about the HPO.
Yeah, great. Now, Neil, you play a very interesting role at the HPO because you are both staff and a musician. Can you tell us your different roles at the HPO?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's really all encompassing for me, you know. I play second horn in the orchestra to my very able and fantastic colleague, Jesse Brooks, who plays first horn. And so I do that role, and I've been doing that for a long time, since 2002. And then I'm also personnel manager, which effectively means I'm human resources. So when we have to get an ensemble on stage, I have to make sure that the appropriate number of players are hired, and so that's kind of the main role. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of other stuff involved with that, running auditions. And also making sure that within the personnel manager role particularly, we operate under a union contract. So I have to make sure that that contract is enforced. And the contract is actually very helpful to have as a guideline for that. So I'm really appreciative of having all that. And then I'm also operations manager, which, you know, I still haven't quite figured out. I've been doing the operations role for a long time, but I still haven't quite figured out what that really means, except that there are a lot of different components to our operations. We have a very large education program. We have small ensembles that go out into the community, to seniors' homes and libraries, etc. And so I have to make sure that a lot of that is coordinated, but I also have to make sure that it's also budgeted for. So I spend a lot of time with a calculator and a computer, working with Gemma New, our music director, and also with our executive director, making sure that it all can work. And so I think that the operations role is kind of an umbrella one, but man, it keeps me on my toes for sure.
Yeah, and I imagine that personnel manager does too. I'm just imagining people who are late for rehearsal or have to cancel, and who do they call? Neil. Do you have any stories about that?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, you know, the thing is, I would say it's true that, you know, occasionally, like I've had people who have been very sick at the last second, who naturally can't come in, and then you can't have an empty chair on stage. And so you have to scramble and find someone. Fortunately, we're in Southern Ontario, and there's a huge number of great musicians in Southern Ontario. But it does make my heart race sometimes, for sure. And then, you know, the other thing is, occasionally, I hate to admit it, but occasionally I've made a mistake. I know it seems pretty much impossible, but I've made mistakes where I think once or twice I haven't hired someone, or communication hasn't been clear. But I can tell you, actually, that musicians are an extremely responsible lot, and they have to be prepared for when they come to work so well.
Mhm.
And they're for the most part, in fact, entirely self-employed. So they have to run their entire careers.
Mhm.
So
And reputation would be a big thing too. You don't want word getting out there about being unreliable. So yeah, you're working with good
absolutely,
people.
absolutely. And people who, there is a sifting process that goes on. People who are unreliable in this business end up not being in the business anymore. I
Right.
mean, it's not, and so you have to really be on top of your schedule. And often players are doing all sorts of things. They're teaching. Of course, they have families that they have to coordinate and take care of. They have other gigs that they're doing, and on top of that, of course, they have to learn all this copious amount of repertoire, uh, and so they have to be very organized people.
Sure.
So it's very rare that somebody screws up. And I'm always, I can tell you that it's always at the very first rehearsal when we're rehearsing for a concert. It's it's always this huge relief to me to see everybody on stage and all the chairs filled,
But
because I'm always thinking to myself, gee, did I make a mistake? Have
yeah,
I missed something?
probably
And
like parents when they see their kids in the right place. Like, phew, they're
yeah,
there
sure.
in a way. Yeah.
Absolutely, and people also, people make choices to be on stage with the HPO, and because I mean, we of course have a core of 32 musicians that make up the orchestra. But if we're doing a very big program, then we have to hire extra musicians, and we're competing with all the other musical organizations in Southern Ontario for those extra musicians. But here's the thing: I like to think, and that the HPO is a really good place to work, and the musicians um, really like being here. They love our music director Gemma New. They like the standard that we play at. We play in a great hall. And so they make choices to be here, and so that means we can reliably get many of the best musicians around, which
Yeah.
is I'm always grateful for our situation because of that, because it makes my job as personnel manager way easier.
Yeah, and you can really tell people want to be here, which is fantastic. It's
Yeah,
such
it's
a lovely team. Yeah.
it's cool. I mean, I think we all together, the musicians, the staff, the board, the volunteers, the stage crew, um, everybody has contributed to making this a good place to work, and a good and so that translates into how we serve the community too,
Hmm.
um, which is in terms of the enthusiasm that our musicians show for doing stuff outside the concert hall. I mean,
Right.
I'll tell you, I personally, one of the most rewarding things for me in the last couple of years has been the Hamilton Public Library's memory cafes, which we participated in a lot last year. And what a memory cafe is, just everyone should know about this because I think they're very cool. Um, the Hamilton Public Library has a program called Memory Cafe, and it is a program that is primarily for people who have memory issues, people who have Alzheimer's, dementia, might have a brain injury, anything like that. And they have a whole bunch of different programs. And so uh, the principal horn, Jesse Brooks, and I have done duo shows for these programs. And there's nothing better, really, than knowing that you can go out in the community and really serve people in a meaningful way. And I think that's, aside from the sort of high standard that we have as an orchestra, that to me is actually the most meaningful thing, is being attached to an organization that really tries hard in a integral way to make the life of the community better.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of our huge
Yeah.
focuses, and I think it's definitely a strength. Now, Neil, just a question for you, because you're in such a unique role at our
Yeah.
orchestra. Do you find that sometimes it can be a little bit tense with you as a musician and also staff? Do you have to walk a fine line there sometimes?
Yeah, I guess so. Yes, definitely. But there are a few things that really help with that, because first of all, I would say, that's a really big question.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I mean, if I have I'll try and be succinct, but it's a hard one. I think there are a couple of things that really help with that. One is the culture of the organization, which I alluded to earlier, that it is a good place to work, and that there's openness between the management and the players, and so it's very collaborative, and that's hugely helpful. So I don't feel as though I'm part of a management team that is, trying to hide anything from the musicians. And there isn't, an adversarial relationship. I mean, yeah, and I think so that's huge. I think we all have similar goals. So that's huge. And then also, I guess, is I alluded to the collective agreement that we signed with the union. And, I've always used this line, and I think it's really true. My boss at work, if I have a boss, are neither the board of directors or the executive director or the players. My boss is the collective agreement. So if a player comes to me and asks something, has a request or something, then I can see whether it's admissible under the collective agreement. And I can either tell them yes or no, And then further to that, the other thing that really further to that, if management, of which I'm a part, but if somebody higher up in management comes and requests something from me to request to the players, then I can refer to the collective agreement and know whether that's admissible. And so that kind of depersonalizes a lot of this for me. But I think I have to be also aware that I am management, and that players may, I try and make things as comfortable as humanly possible for players, but players may not be comfortable with saying something to me, and that's fine, because there are mechanisms within the organization to sort things through if there's a problem.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I get. Does that
okay
answer?
I get to know. Absolutely. Collective agreement.
Yeah.
Now, let's get to know a little bit more about you. How did you get into classical music?
Well, I'll tell you, I felt very grateful and privileged all my life, and I have been. When I was a kid, I went to a public school in Toronto that actually had a school orchestra and a school band. So I started in grade 4 on the French horn, which frankly, parents out there, it's a little too early to be starting this instrument. If you're going to start a brass instrument at that age, I think you should really start the trumpet. And I did want to play the trumpet. And the reason I wanted to play the trumpet was because when I was in school, I remember on Remembrance Day, like when I was in grade 3 or something, there was a trumpet player who played the last post, and I thought that was super cool. And so I really wanted to play the trumpet, but they had too many trumpet players, and not enough French horn players. So I got assigned the French horn, which I really wasn't interested in particularly until grade 9. Prior to that, I wanted to be a goaltender for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but
Okay.
it became clear I didn't have the requisite skills for that job quite quickly, as I let in goal
Do
after
you play
goal.
hockey now?
It's no. Well, no. I mean, I guess I do. I'm kind of a bit of a fitness nut, but I haven't played hockey in ages. Although I'll tell you that recently I took out my hockey stick and I banged a tennis ball against. Did repeated slap shots against my garage door. But no, I don't really play.
Okay. Was that to
Anyway,
get
but I
some?
got more and more interested. I think, I became more and more interested as time went by. And I think the first thing was, and I don't want to make this too long-winded, but to be long-winded about this, I think grade 9 or 10, I got an album of Wagner overtures with New York Philharmonic and Leonard Bernstein. And I'm not a huge Wagner fan anymore, but when I was in grade 9 or 10, it was just the right thing. And I listened to that album constantly. So at first I thought I'd like to be a music teacher, but then I just thought, I just love this. And so, I mean, I could tell you the whole trajectory of, if you want, but I'll be brief. I went to University of Toronto for performance on the French horn. I also have an education degree too. And then I went to Germany, and actually went to the Royal Conservatory, and studied for a year. And then I went to Germany and studied for a year. And then I came back and just tried working. And fortunately, in the late 1980s and early 90s, there was a lot of work in Southern Ontario. And but it was love for it, really. Just kind of a privilege to have the opportunity to have horn lessons during high school. Have the disposable income for us to do that, our family. And then just sheer love of it, because it isn't easy.
No.
You know?
Now let's get to that and
Yeah.
talk specifically about the horn. And we have had some fantastic questions
Okay.
from Instagram and Facebook and from our survey. But before we get to those questions, perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about the horn.
Sure. Well, okay. So those of you who haven't seen it, I'm trying to sort of figure out how to. There we go. This is a French horn, and there is what's known as a bell here, and so the original French horn. I can give you a very brief history. The original French horn didn't have these keys at all. It was just a bunch of tubes, and it was mainly used as to signal in the country, because people didn't have cell phones back then. And so the way you play a French horn is you buzz your lip like this, and that in itself doesn't sound terribly good. So you put on this thing, if I can see. Oh yeah, there. How we do this? Mouthpiece.
Good.
Yeah, and then you can control the pitch a little better with a mouthpiece. See? So you make that buzzy sound, and then the horn. You put the mouthpiece into the horn, and the horn amplifies the sound. Like that. And originally, as I said, the horn didn't have any keys. So the way people manipulated the pitch was with their lip, but also with their hand, their right hand, in the bell of the instrument. And I can show you that if I can figure out how. There we go. So watch my right hand here, and I will attempt to play a scale. And so there was a whole school of playing maybe 200 years ago, up until, well, more than 200 years ago. Anyway, from about 1750 until about the 1830s or 40s, where they played entirely with what was known as hand horn or natural horn. And Mozart wrote concertos for that. Brahms, he wrote his symphonies so that they were played on hand horn. And then the Industrial Revolution came along, and these keys were added. So you could play the same scale using your fingers to access different lengths of pipe. And, I'm not an acoustician or a physicist, so I won't bother to explain how that affects pitch. But nonetheless, if you watch my hand here, my left hand, you can see that that is how you manipulate pitch to a certain extent. Let me see, what else was I going to say about that? I can't remember.
Okay, well,
yeah.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Composers have used crooks, right, to change the length of the horn so that they can play in different keys. And this would actually, maybe you can address that, but it also brings up a question from Instagram at Bookfiend13, who asked how many meters of brass in a horn? And so would that be different now? And do you have a double horn? And so how many meters are in there?
Yeah. So here's the thing. So you used a couple of terms that maybe the audience would like to know about. So a crook, a crook is not, Richard M. Nixon or anything, who was not a crook apparently, but nonetheless, a crook was it on the original horn that didn't have the keys. It was this kind of curlicue of metal, of tubing, that would be added to the horn right about here. And during, say, a Beethoven symphony, I wish I had a horn to show you this, but I don't, unfortunately. During a Beethoven symphony, you would play in a lot of different keys, and the way you changed keys was by changing these round curlicues of tube, and they would be different lengths. So you're actually changing the length of the instrument, and that helped you change the key. So if you had a big curlicue, then you'd be playing lower notes, and if you had a really teeny curlicue, you'd be playing higher notes. And so the players would have these at their disposal during the symphony, and they would just quickly change these, and that affected the pitch. So that's effectively how they changed keys.
Okay, there's a story about Haydn writing in a different key for horn, and so he very quickly had to get the local blacksmith to make new crooks for the horn players just in time for the concert.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. And you know what? I think I probably even know which symphony that is. I mean, I've never heard that story. I bet you it's the last movement of the Farewell Symphony, which is in a really weird key that I've never ever seen anywhere else. So
I think you're right. That rings a bell. Yeah.
Okay,
so back to our question: how many meters of brass are in a horn?
Okay, so the quick answer is, you had another term called double horn. And the reason it's called a double horn, can you see, let me see. Okay, can you see how there are two sets of tube here? So this set of tube, these two sets of tubes effectively represent crooks. This front set of tube is quite long. And then the back set of tube, which you can't really see very well here, is shorter. And so the back set of tubes is accessed by putting my thumb valve down. And that makes the horn a little shorter and makes it easier to play high. Although honestly, between you and me and the gatepost and all these thousands of people watching, I've always had a heck of a time playing high. When Jessie Brooks comes in here, you get her to play a lot of high notes. That's why I play second horn, which we'll get to in a little while. But anyway, but anyway, the short answer is it's about 18 feet or 6 meters of tubing. It's quite substantial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Now we have a question over here, which I'm sure you would like to answer. Pat Dickinson, as a French horn player, do you stay connected with Jamie Somerville?
Well, funny you should mention that, because I'll tell you that Jamie is actually, the answer is yes. And in fact, actually, Jamie is staying in the house right now. Actually, he's upstairs right now. This is my home, by the way. This is my dining room. And Jamie is upstairs right now, actually not practicing the horn. He's practicing guitar right now, which is a new interest of his. So yeah, I mean, we've always hung out. I've known him since 19. We were just talking about this last night. I met him at a Toronto Symphony Youth Orchestra audition in September of 1979. So I've known him a heck of a long time.
Yeah, so, yeah. That's it's a great question. It's well timed. Thank you, Pat. And another thing is in a future. Oh, Diana Weir adds, bring him on, make him say hello. We will be doing that at a future session. We'll be having a session with Jessie Brooks, and I think Jamie Somerville may make an appearance.
Yeah, I think the plan is for Jessie and Jamie and I to all three of us be on that one. So
and it looks like Diana Weir has challenged you to a guitar horn duo. So we'll leave that with you, Neil.
You know what, Diana? We will plan that, and we will make that happen.
Oh, great! That's a promise.
So we'll figure out how to do that.
Perfect. Perfect. Now let's move on to another question from Instagram. This is from GC Pinto, a musician who is, I believe, who says, "What is a comfortable range on the horn?" The horn has a massive, massive range.
Yeah,
and you might want to address the first and second horn here.
Yeah, well, I mean, in fact, actually, it's interesting. I was thinking, the key to that question is comfortable, really. And, you know, arrangers, people who are doing studio arrangements. Let me explain this. So if you're going into, say, which doesn't happen very often anymore, to play the background music for a television commercial or a television show, then time is money, and arrangers don't want to write anything that's too difficult because everybody's being paid to be there, and so so they write things that are comfortable. So so a comfortable range of the instrument is technically we have about a 4-octave range, but the comfortable range is really I'd say from, I don't know how much this will mean to a lot of you, but G in the treble clef, G at the top of the staff, so that note, and then downwards, down 2 octaves, 2.5 octaves below that. Right.
Now, Neil, we're talking written, not sounding, right? I mean, another complication of the horn is that, well, if they play a C, it'll sound an F, right?
Yeah. That's right. So really the top note is a D on the piano.
There we go. Thanks.
You know, I mean, but that's not the top note of the instrument. The top note is really an F on the piano above that. No, it isn't. What am I talking about?
Like I always think of the high C as the point, but that would be written.
Yeah. And sorry, I'm now getting this all messed up. Somebody help me. Nobody's going to help me here. So sorry, it's a C on the piano is what I just played up to, and at top F on the piano. And then, but you know, I mean, you can also go, I played down to what's known as a pedal C, but you can actually do an octave below that. Right?
Wow.
Yeah, but you know, that's not something, that octave is not something that composers write for very often.
No.
Shostakovich wrote a little bit down there. You have to get yourself in, so did Mahler. You have to get yourself in pretty good shape to be able to do that. Well, I mean, that comes relatively easy to me, that register. The upper register, not so much.
Well, and that's right. You play second horn, which would be low horn, right? So second and fourth would be low horn. First and third would be high horn. We have a question here from Brandon Walker, who is a composer.
Okay.
He asks, can you describe how you see the role and dynamic of the French horns as a section within the orchestra and the individual roles as in pairs within the section?
Okay. Yeah, that's a very sophisticated question, you know. So, you know, the horn is really, I think one of the things that makes the horn really great to play is that we act in concert with the woodwind section a lot. And so if the woodwinds are all playing together, we can be added in as sort of a bed to that. We play in the same range as the bassoon, which is the lowest instrument of the woodwind family. And but we have a very large range. So a first horn player could easily do a unison solo with the oboe or the clarinet. So we play a lot with the woodwinds, but we're a brass instrument. So if there's some sort of magnificent fanfare-like thing, and I can think of, for example, you know, Star Wars. A lot of you guys out there will know Star Wars, and there's some magnificent sort of brassy horn writing. So we're really a bridge between the brass and the woodwinds to sort of, I guess, simplify it as much as possible. And yeah.
Oh, just also with chamber music, when we think of the French horn, it's kind of a chameleon. It is also in a woodwind quintet and a brass quintet.
Well, you know, I mean, and that, the dynamic range, in other words, how loud you can get and how soft you can get on the instrument is quite remarkable. And so I love playing with woodwind quintets because I'm pretty good at playing super soft. And I love that color, the timbre of all the instruments combined. But yes, brass quintet too, you know, because you can be very bold. And I think it's the kind of, I guess, emotional range of the instrument that is so attractive. And it's one of the things that makes it so versatile within the orchestra. And what it means is also that particularly the first horn player, but the first and second horn players are amongst the busiest players in the orchestra, at least in the winds and brass, because we're constantly going back and forth between winds and brass.
Right.
So rewarding to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we have a couple of questions about the difficulty of playing the horn.
Yeah.
So first of all, Jan asks, all instruments are difficult in their own way, but the French horn has been called the most difficult of all. Can you tell us what is the challenge in getting a great sound?
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question. huh. You know, I think I should say, I think all instruments are super difficult. So it's a little bit, maybe a little bit misleading to say it's the most difficult. I guess what happens is it's the most evidently difficult because we tend to make a few more errors
Okay,
that are very audible. Yeah,
let me just push in the next question here because it
sure.
relates to that. From Facebook, George Montgomery asks, someone once told me that the horn is the only forgivable instrument in the orchestra. By that, I assume he meant that should the horn player err during a performance, he or she is not chastised. Is this so? And if so, how come?
Well, you know, chastise is a pretty strong word. I think, you know, in terms of being chastised, I think horn players are their own worst sort of critics. And so I remember there was I can't remember his name, but a pitcher. He was a knuckleballer, and he used to play for the Blue Jays a few years ago. And he was a terribly interesting guy. And I heard him interviewed, I think on the CBC, and he was asked, "So how long does it take to get over a bad performance?" And he said, "Well, it used to take me about 72 hours, but now I've got it down to about 12." And you know, I feel the same way. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
and so we're our own worst critics. But um, horn play, I think the horn is a very treacherous instrument in that the sort of bullseyes for the notes, which would sort of more formally be known as the harmonic series. In other words, the notes are placed. It's very hard to explain this. The notes are placed very closely together. So, so to sort of pick up the instrument and just play, you know, and play a B natural, which that was, and just do it, can often end up kind of being, if you're not careful. And so there's a lot of performance psychology involved with that, because you know, at least I know personally, I'm going to go into a performance and I am going to make mistakes. I'm going to do my very best to minimize them. But it's certainly a challenge to sort of, on a very basic level, just to sort of even hit notes properly. And we spend a lot of time um, alone in practice rooms just starting notes because it's so treacherous doing that. And, you know, after many years and some thoughtful practice, you get pretty good at it. But anyway, you asked about sound production. And in other words, how challenging is it to get a good sound? And the uh, the short answer is very, but it's a very simple process in a way. You have to practice every day, and you have to practice enough so that the musculature around your mouth is very toned, and 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 that, you know, if I don't practice for even even a day, but usually it really shows itself after 2 days. Um, my sound gets very fluffy and not focused and not beautiful, and I have to really during the performance year, I just don't take time off. It's 7 days a week. It took me years. Some people have very natural, good sounds. It took me years and years to develop a decent sound. And so I'm very careful. And if I do take time off, it's in large chunks during the summer, because just taking intermittent time off just isn't going to work. I can tell you a very short story that will
Sure.
illustrate this. One of my former teachers was Eugene Riddick, who was first horn in the Toronto Symphony for 36 years. And I remember driving actually to Boston with him to visit Jamie Somerville. And so we were in the car for 10 hours. So we did a lot of talking. I asked him, "So what's the thing you miss the least about playing the horn?" because he'd completely stopped at that point. And he said, being prepared.
Mm.
And I said, what do you mean? And do you mean actually like practicing your music? And he said, no, I mean being physically prepared, being in shape, doing enough exercises with your, this is called an embouchure, with your mouth to stay in proper shape. And I think honestly, that's when I retire, that's probably the thing I will miss the least. I can tell you a lot of things I'll miss terribly. But that's the thing I'll miss the least, because you have to be very, very consistent about your work.
So Neil, right now during this time, are you taking time off from the horn?
Definitely. So when I knew I had to appear here, I scrambled over the last couple of days to actually get in shape so that I could even kind of minimally play properly.
I don't quite believe you, but that's okay.
I did a little bit. But I don't normally. I'll tell you that I haven't taken a huge chunk of time off in many years, and so this is kind of a nice moment in certain ways. To do that.
A silver lining.
Yeah.
Now, let's move on to our next and final sets of questions here. So do you have some favorite music from the last few seasons of the HPO that you have really loved?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's easy. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, first of all, I should say more broadly, and I've said this before, that playing with the ensemble and with my friends in the orchestra is just such a pleasure that I would say almost every concert, I'm kind of thrilled. I will answer your question, but I'm kind of thrilled to play with such great players and such genuinely good people, and I feel incredibly grateful. But to answer your question specifically, I loved doing the planets and Mahler Symphony No. 5, because they're both quite different, but they're both huge orchestras, and I like the sort of range of color and expression and dynamic that a huge ensemble like that can bring. And they're both just great, magnificent pieces in different ways. The planets is the orchestration is just so great, and it's just so it's familiar to me, because I listened to it when I was younger. So that was a great experience. And Mahler 5 is just kind of this vast, magnificent architecture, or this landscape that Mahler presents. And so that was thrilling. And then I have to say also, we've played your piece, The Hockey Sweater, twice, and it's been thrilling in different ways for me to do that. The first time, honestly, was because Roch Carrier, both times Roch was there. Roch Carrier, who wrote the book, The Hockey Sweater, and it was kind of thrilling for me. And actually, my dad was jazzed about that.
Oh, yeah?
He just thought this was the greatest thing. And so, it was super cool meeting him and hearing him do that narration, which is just so great. Your orchestration is fantastic for that. But then the other thing that was really super cool about that first time was that Steve Sitarsky, who's our concertmaster, and I got to stand at the front of the stage with hockey sticks, and both in our number 9 Maurice Richard sweaters. And although I'm a Leaf fan, I know it's like kind of heretical to say, but I have a super soft spot for the Montreal Canadiens in my heart. In part because in the 1970s, the Leafs were so terrible. So every time they get knocked out of the playoffs, I'd immediately default to the other Canadian team that was in the playoffs. And the Habs, the Montreal Canadiens, were just great at that time. Anyway, So just standing there and duking it out with Steve at the front of the stage, and not literally in a Don Cherry sense, but
Well, there was a check there.
What?
There was a check.
Yeah, we did. We
Yeah.
actually, yeah, there is a check.
Yeah,
And so that was super cool.
I'm glad you like that, Neil. When I was writing it, I was sitting at my piano thinking, can I really write a little hockey game? Are the musicians going to do it? Are they going to hate me? So it's nice to hear that. No, it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was awesome. And then the second time we did it was great too, because we recorded it.
Yes.
And, you know, that's, I think, like in terms of full orchestra, we've done, we certainly did a really good, nice recording with Twin Within, which is a local Hamilton indie group, which was really fun. I didn't play on that because there was no French horn. But so we've done recordings before, but that was, I think, our first sort of full orchestra recording in kind of the time I've been with the orchestra. And it was great to have that kind of, I guess, documentation. And then, you know, to do it with our music director, Gemma New, was really, really cool.
Yeah, so, we can post a link to that recording.
Yeah.
Now, a couple of follow-up questions to that. And one of them comes from John on Facebook. So it says, so who is your favorite composer for the French horn? And what are the most challenging pieces?
Okay. So, you know, that's an interesting question. So in terms of solo repertoire for the horn, I'd say Richard Strauss and Mozart have to be kind of the obvious ones. Mozart wrote a bunch of concertos, 4 of which have kind of come down to us in a full form. And they are magnificent and challenging because they require that you have a lot of musical insight to play them beautifully, and a lot of I guess technical discipline too. So Mozart, and with Richard Strauss, certainly the second concerto. He wrote 2. He wrote one when he was very young for his dad, who was first horn of the Munich Opera, I think, and he wrote that when he was 18, and then he wrote one in 1942 or 43 when he was, I guess would have been 78 or 79 at that time, I think, and that one is super complicated and very technical, and Jamie Somerville, who's upstairs, can play the heck out of that one. But there aren't that many players who can really do a job on that. And so, but they're terrific pieces. I have to admit, even though I've never attempted Strauss 2 in public, I really liked listening to that one a lot. And then
a related question here from Instagram at Ian Kibble Masks. What is your favorite orchestral horn solo?
Yeah, that's, well, okay. There are a lot of them, but I would say any of our listeners, any of you people out there, I think you might want to go and listen to the last movement of Brahms Symphony No. 1. And there is a magnificent solo that just sort of comes out towards the beginning of the movement, like the sun, you know, rising over the mountains. Mm-hmm. And it's melodic and beautiful. But I think here's the thing about orchestral horn solos, and I guess this would be true to a lesser extent with sort of solo horn pieces. The thing that makes, listen everyone, go and listen to Brahms 1, the last movement. But if you listen to that horn solo, it's not just the horn solo. And you'll appreciate that this is a composer, Abby. It's everything that surrounds it. It's all the instrumentation that's below it. It's the chord changes that are underneath it, because it's quite a simple solo, really. Let's see if I can do this. Let's see, okay. it's a fairly simple solo.
But you're right. It's such a magical moment.
It is. So anyway, that's my favorite, I think, if I had to really name one.
And that's some homework for us. Go and listen to it.
Yeah, go listen to it just because you'll like it. Yeah.
Now we just have two last questions for you.
Sure.
Now, when you're between rehearsals or right before the show, do you have a favorite spot in Hamilton to eat at?
Oh, man, Hamilton is such a food city that that's a very, I can be very long-winded about this answer, but I'll tell you that if you're asking me specifically between rehearsals, between the dress rehearsal and the concert, we meaning a bunch of brass players, the brass players. Oh, yeah, I know. Always go. I mean, almost invariably go to the Benton Viet Thai restaurant at Vine and James North, and they know me so well in there that the woman who I presume is part owner, or at least runs the place, whenever I come in, she always says, 303, no balls. And what that means is number 303, which consists of vermicelli, shredded pork, and spring roll, and sprouts, without the pork balls. Which are so anyway, but invariably, I mean, it's a little joke, and I almost always order that. So that's one place, but there are lots of places. Like, so for example, Deco's Deli, which is inside Jackson Square. I really like that place. The guy who runs it is super friendly, really an amazing guy. I can tell you that Mesa on James North has great Mexican food. Gemma knew, and Gemma just by herself, I'm sure, goes to Hamburger on on King William. Yeah, there's also another location, I think, on Ottawa Street, and we've been there too. Gemma and I have been there too. I really like the Mulberry Coffee House. I think it's awesome. And of course, Bread Bar. There are two locations, one on James and one on where's the other one? The other one is on not Dundurn, but
it's on Locke.
Locke. Thank you.
Locke.
So yeah, that's
a good list.
Great.
We can compile these things. Yeah, great. And one last question for you, as a way for us to get to know you a little bit better. Sure. Do you have any hobbies, or is there something we might be surprised to know about you?
Well, I mean, I think, from people who actually know me, they're always surprised to find that I'm an introvert. But I guess I'm a social introvert, because I do like dealing with people. I'm a fitness nut. So I've done, I do less long distance running than I used to, because I'm going to be 60 this year. I'm also a news junkie, but also I really like to sing. And in fact, I have been a member of a choir that is a choir exclusively for professional instrumentalists. The rules are you have to be a professional instrumentalist, but you can't be a singer.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I really love doing that. And in fact, many years ago, I lifted from CD a bunch of vocal stuff by a cappella vocal stuff by Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys guy, and I loved that stuff so much that I got it when you had to do this, as opposed to just kind of get GarageBand or whatever on your computer. I rented an 8-track recorder from Long and McQuaid, and I recorded all the vocal parts, and I So, and that was a pet project of me.
That's fun. That's fun.
Totally loved doing that.
So here we have from Tony, who's an HPO board member, by the way. He asks, can Neil sing us a tune?
Oh my God.
And I should also point out that earlier on the feed, Christian Sharp had said that you are a crooner, and that with this performance with you and Jamie Somerville, that you should also sing.
Oh my God.
Lance Ouellette seconded that. So there's an official request here for you, Neil.
Okay, so all right. So I will sing. I will sing a brief segment of 2 tunes. One, I will sing. Let's see. How About You, which was debuted, I think, by Frank Sinatra and the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra. You realize I'm not prepared for this, but. All right, I'll try.
That's part of the fun.
I like New York in June. How about you? I like a Gershwin tune. How about you? I like a fireside when a storm is due. I like potato chips, moonlight, and motor trips. How about you? Anyway, that's one little phrase. And the other one that is more pertinent to today is, I understand it's your birthday, Abby.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, so happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Abby. Happy birthday to you.
Wow, thanks, Neil. That makes my day. Thank you. That was
You're
great.
welcome.
You know, you're really good. I think we should book you for an after-hours HPO gig.
You know what? I would have to learn words. I'm terrible at remembering words.
We'll get you a teleprompter.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, this has been lots of fun and gives us such insight into, well, your world and the horn, what it is to be a horn player, what it is to be a staff member of an orchestra. So thank you very much for this.
Thanks.
We also have some well wishes here. We have a message from the Waterdown District High School Music Department, and they have been our adopted school for this year. And they say, WDHS, and this is you, we had fun hearing your stories at band camp.
Oh, I loved going to their band camp. Yeah, I miss them too.
Great, and we also have a response here saying this is a great series to recommend to our student musicians since we can't have you out to the school. This is a great virtual alternative. So that's great. We're happy to have some of our students watching as well. So thank you so much, Neil.
You're welcome.
Yeah, this has been wonderful. And to all of you for joining us and for these superb questions. This is just such a treat to have everybody so involved with this. And we're continuing with this series. We will see you here next week, Wednesday at noon. And in the meantime, if you'd like to visit hpo.org to find some of our HPO at-home content, there are some videos of our musicians and other arts resources. So that's it for now. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and thank you, Neil.
Thanks. Bye-bye.